Governor, you've made this request before. Is there any reason to believe that it will be answered differently? Have you had any conversations with the president, with the federal government, and is there any indication that they are going to pull out or back down?
Well, I spoke twice this morning, shortly after I received the call of this shooting. I spoke with the President's Chief of Staff, and first request was to get her people out of there, to get these federal agents out of there. They were going to cause more chaos. And second call is, with no uncertain terms, that we will investigate this. We will not be stonewalled. What we've already seen, and you saw it this morning, before any investigation is done, you have the most powerful people in the federal government spinning stories and putting up pictures, and unrelated people who we don't know anything about, and a picture of a firearm to try and spin a narrative. And I ask Americans, this will end when enough Americans say this will end. Do I have any confidence Donald Trump will do the right thing? No, I don't have a lot of confidence Donald Trump will do the right thing. I do have a lot of confidence that the majority of the American people will do the right thing. And I think there cannot be very many people across this country looking right now, after all the reporting that's been done, after everything that's been said, under the pretense that they are here about immigration reform, and quit referring to these people as law enforcement. They are not law enforcement. We have law enforcement who do an incredible job. And to listen to Greg Bovino denigrate the work of our people who are out there cleaning up their mess, no, I don't have a lot of confidence that he himself will do it. But here's what I do have confidence in. There's a whole lot of Republicans, for whatever reason, cannot find their spine. But they might find the ability to know that they're not going to win another election as long as they live, unless they stand up for what's right, and stand up for the rule of law, and stand up for human decency, and that's the moment.
High alert. The governor of Minnesota exploded at Trump after the death of an innocent citizen. What's happening on the streets of America? This is an unprecedented danger. Something absolutely terrifying is unfolding right now in the heart of America, and the world needs to know about it. The governor of Minnesota just issued one of the most powerful and direct confrontations against a sitting president in modern American history. This isn't political theater. This is about life and death on American streets. Federal agents are operating in Minneapolis, and innocent citizens are being killed. The death toll is rising, families are grieving, and a governor is standing up and saying, enough is enough. What you're about to hear will shock you to your core. Stay with me, because every single American needs to understand what's happening in Minnesota right now. The shocking death of Alex Pretty, a 37-year-old nurse with no criminal record, at the hands of federal agents in Minneapolis, is the fuse of a national crisis. He was just watching the actions of ICE when he was shot down. Let me paint you the full picture of who Alex Pretty was, because this matters. This was not some dangerous criminal. This was not someone breaking the law. Alex Pretty was a dedicated ICU nurse who spent his days caring for America's veterans at a VA hospital. His colleagues described him as valued, skilled, and compassionate. He had no criminal record whatsoever. He was a lawful firearms owner, a law-abiding citizen who loved the outdoors and cared deeply about his community and his state. On Saturday, January 25, 2026, Alex was doing something that every American has the constitutional right to do. He was exercising his First Amendment rights by bearing witness to what ICE agents were doing on the streets of South Minneapolis. He wasn't interfering. He wasn't threatening anyone. He was simply watching and documenting what was happening in his own neighborhood. And for that, for exercising the most fundamental right guaranteed by the Constitution, he was shot and killed by federal agents in broad daylight. The images of what happened are out there for the world to see. Alex's parents, Michael and Susan, are now living every parent's worst nightmare. Their son went to work caring for veterans. He lived his life with passion for his state, and he died on a Minneapolis street, killed by his own government. Governor Walz spoke with Alex's parents just hours after their son's murder, and Michael made one thing absolutely clear to the governor. Don't let them forget Alex's story. The world knows how he died, but they need to know how he lived. This is now the second fatality in Minnesota during what the federal government is calling Operation Metro Surge. Before Alex, there was Renee Good, a poet and a mother, described as a bright spirit, also killed by federal forces. Her last words, according to witnesses, were heartbreaking. "I'm not mad at you." A mother, in her final moments, showing compassion even to those who took her life. And we haven't even had time to properly tell Renee's story before Alex became the next victim. But it doesn't stop there. This is the third shooting incident this month alone. 3 shootings, 2 deaths, and the month of January isn't even over yet. Federal immigration enforcement forces are operating in Minnesota with what Governor Walz calls 3,000 untrained agents, and they're leaving a trail of blood and devastation in their wake. Governor Tim Walz accuses Trump and his officials of immediately labeling Pretty a domestic terrorist and of tarnishing his reputation, contradicting the images of what happened. Are they hiding the truth? Here's where this story takes an even darker and more sinister turn. Within minutes of Alex Pretty being killed, the most powerful people in America began a coordinated campaign to destroy his reputation and gaslight the entire nation about what really happened. President Trump, Vice President J.D. Vance, Greg Bovino, and Kristi Noem all came out and painted a completely different picture from what the video evidence shows. They described Alex as a domestic terrorist. They claimed he was crazed. They said he was running at law enforcement with the intent to kill massive numbers of them. Think about that for a moment. A VA nurse, a man who dedicated his life to caring for veterans, was instantly transformed in their narrative into a violent terrorist trying to murder federal agents. All of this happened before his body was even cold, before his family could even process their grief. Governor Walz didn't mince words about this. He told Americans, no matter their political affiliation, whether they're conservatives flying Trump flags, libertarians, or democratic socialists, to look at what they saw with their own eyes and compare it to what they're being told by the White House. The governor called it besmirching, sullying, and gaslighting on a scale that should terrify every American. But the cover-up didn't stop with just words. Federal agents closed the crime scene. They swept away the evidence. And here's something that should send chills down your spine. They defied a court order. A court, the judicial branch of our government, ordered that the evidence be preserved and examined, and federal agents ignored it. They removed evidence, they controlled the narrative, and they made it impossible for independent investigation to take place. Governor Walz spoke directly about this, saying that the most powerful man in the world sat behind a keyboard at 2 a.m. and dragged the name of a dead VA nurse, a beloved son, coworker, and friend through the mud. He called it despicable beyond all description. And he's right, because if the government can kill you and then immediately rewrite the story of who you were and what happened, if they can ignore court orders and destroy evidence, then none of us are safe. This isn't about waiting to see both sides. This isn't about giving them the benefit of the doubt. This is about basic human decency and basic truth. The evidence is there. The videos exist. And yet the official narrative from the White House is contradicting what millions of people can see with their own eyes. Walz reveals that this is the 3rd shooting occurrence and the 2nd death during Operation Metro Surge. This month alone. What kind of operation is this that kills innocent citizens? Let's talk about what Operation Metro Surge actually is, because this name sounds like something out of a dystopian movie, but it's happening right now in America. The federal government deployed approximately 3,000 agents to Minnesota. Governor Walz specifically calls them untrained agents, and based on what's happening, that assessment seems accurate. This operation is supposedly about immigration enforcement. It's supposedly about securing borders and prioritizing criminals. And Governor Walz actually acknowledges that most Americans, regardless of political affiliation, want secure borders and smart immigration enforcement. He even thanked the local press for doing deep dives that show Minnesota already does exactly that. Minnesota law enforcement already prioritizes actual criminals in their immigration enforcement. But what's happening on the streets of Minneapolis is not common sense enforcement. It's not lawful enforcement. And it's certainly not humane enforcement. In just 1 month, we have 3 shooting incidents and 2 innocent Americans dead. These aren't criminals being apprehended. Renee Good was a poet and a mother. Alex Pretty was a nurse caring for veterans. These are law-abiding citizens being killed in their own communities. Governor Walz made it crystal clear that the conversation should not be about how many state patrol officers or police or National Guard members he can put on the streets. The question isn't about Minnesota's response. The question is about how many of these federal ICE agents and whoever else was thrown into this, quote, unholy mess. How many can Trump get out of Minnesota? The streets of Minneapolis have essentially become an occupied zone. Tens of thousands of peaceful Minnesota citizens showed up to march when the wind chill was 40 below zero because they love their state and their country. Think about that. 40 below. That's the kind of cold that can kill you in minutes. And yet thousands of people braved it to peacefully protest what's happening to their neighbors. And it's not just the deaths. Children in Minnesota are hiding in their houses, afraid to go outside. Governor Walz compared it to the story of Anne Frank, saying that somebody is going to write that children's story about Minnesota, about kids too afraid to leave their homes in America in 2026. That's the reality of Operation Metro Surge. That's what this federal occupation has done to an American state. The governor demands the immediate withdrawal of the 3,000 untrained agents from Minnesota and questions Trump's dark plan. He calls for a national unity against what he calls the abuse of federal power. Governor Tim Walz stood at that podium and asked the question that every American should be asking. What's the plan, Donald Trump? What is the plan? What do Minnesotans need to do to get these federal agents out of their state? He asked it twice, and the repetition was intentional, because there doesn't seem to be a plan beyond creating fear, violence, and chaos. Walz threw down a direct challenge to the president. He said if fear, violence, and chaos were what Trump wanted from Minnesota, then Trump clearly underestimated the people of that state and the nation. He described Minnesotans as tired but resolved, peaceful but they will never forget, angry but not giving up hope, and above all else, clearly unified. The governor said if Trump's intention was to make an example of Minnesota, then Walz is damn proud of the example the world is seeing. Because what the world is seeing is a state that believes in law and order, that believes in peace, and that believes Trump needs to pull those 3,000 untrained agents out before they kill another person. But this wasn't just a message to Trump. Walz spoke directly to all Americans watching. He asked everyone, no matter how they're watching, whether with curiosity, bewilderment, horror, scorn, or sympathy. One simple question. What side do you want to be on? Do you want to be on the side of an all-powerful federal government that can kill, injure, menace, and kidnap its citizens off the streets? Or do you want to be on the side of a nurse at a VA hospital who died bearing witness to such a government? On the side of a mother whose last words were, "I'm not mad at you." On the side of tens of thousands of peaceful citizens who marched in 40 below wind chill because they love their state and country? And here's something powerful that Walz said. You're allowed to decide at any point that you're not with this anymore. If you voted for this administration, if you even thought Operation Metro Surge sounded like a good idea a month ago, you're still allowed to look at what's happening in Minnesota and say, this isn't what I voted for, and this isn't what I want. The governor isn't asking people to switch political parties. He's not asking them to abandon their principles. He's asking them not to stand by idly. He's asking them to speak out, to share what they're seeing with others, and to urge others to put politics aside, because, as Walz said, we're no longer having a political debate. We're having a moral debate. This is about accountability. Walz made it clear that he's accountable for things that happen in Minnesota, and he will take responsibility for that. Someone has to be accountable. Someone has to hold the final decision. But who's holding the federal government accountable when they kill citizens and then slander them posthumously? In a speech that will shock the nation, Walz confronts Trump directly. If fear, violence, and chaos were what you wanted from us, then you clearly underestimated the people of this state and nation. Minnesota may be peaceful, but you won't forget. Are we on the brink of chaos? This is the moment that will echo through American history. Governor Tim Walz, standing before the cameras, speaking not just as a governor, but as a human being, as a fellow citizen, delivered one of the most powerful rebukes to presidential authority in modern times. He described Minnesota as tired but resolved. Think about what that means. These people are exhausted. They're dealing with an occupation of their state. They're attending funerals. They're comforting families. They're afraid to let their children go outside. But they're not giving up. They're not backing down. They're resolved to see this through. He said they're peaceful, but they'll never forget. That's not a threat of violence. That's a promise of memory. That's a promise that Alex Pretty's name won't be forgotten. That Renee Good's name won't be forgotten. That what happened on the streets of Minneapolis in January 2026 will be remembered by history. They're angry, but they won't give up hope. There's righteous anger in Minnesota right now. How could there not be? 2 of their neighbors are dead. Children are hiding in their homes. Federal agents are roaming their streets. But anger hasn't turned to despair. They still believe change is possible. They still believe in America. And above all else, they are clearly unified. This is perhaps what should worry the federal government most. Minnesota isn't divided on this. People across the political spectrum are looking at what's happening and saying this is wrong. When you have conservatives and progressives standing shoulder to shoulder saying the government has gone too far, that's a powerful force. Governor Walz said that Minnesotans have won the hearts and minds of people across this country, and they've done it through their peaceful, resolved defense of their neighbors and the Constitution, not through violence, not through riots, but through peaceful resistance, through documenting what's happening, through speaking truth to power. He closed with a message directly to President Trump. You can end this today. Pull these folks back. Do humane, focused, effective immigration control. You've got the support of all of us to do that. Let Minnesota law enforcement continue doing what they do, making Minnesota one of the safest states in the country, one of the best places to live. Allow their children to go back to school. But he also issued this challenge. Show some decency. Pull these folks out. Reset this situation. Allow the governor and the attorney general to do the job they were elected to do. Protect the people of Minnesota and carry out the laws of Minnesota. This is an inflection point for America. If we cannot all agree that smearing an American citizen and besmirching everything they stood for, asking us not to believe what we saw with our own eyes, if we can't agree that's wrong, then what hope do we have as a nation? Are we witnessing the beginning of something that will fundamentally change America? Or will this be the moment when Americans of all political beliefs stood up and said, enough is enough. The next days and weeks will tell us which path we're on. But one thing is certain. Minnesota is not backing down. Governor Walz has drawn a line in the sand, and the question now is, how will the rest of America respond? What would you do if you were the governor? Your voice matters. Leave your comment and share this urgent alert.